All right, diving in today to another project in the crypto space. This is one, of course, that has been flying up the charts for quite a few days. So we thought, hey, let's take a deeper dive into understanding what Waves is trying to do, where they are, kind of how Waves 2.0 is going to roll out, and get a little deeper on all of this. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back to TechPath. Let's get into it today because this is kind of one of those times in which you look at the altcoin market. You see very little green in the water. In many cases, when you have a token that is shining, there's always a very interesting reason that we have one particular project, well, there's a handful, but this particular project that has been able to really start to move up the charts over the past few days, and that, of course, is Waves. And Waves Technology, which is a company that is, they're actually based here in Miami, kind of interesting. What they're trying to do essentially is create a decentralized open source capacity to do, it really feels like a pretty much an all things, kind of like a Swiss Army knife for DeFi and also metaverse. So if you think about certain projects that are looking at either high-speed payment rails, you have some that are doing NFT projects, you have projects that are maybe have different utility. Waves essentially is trying to bridge all of those elements into basically one format. They've been talking about this 2.0 upgrade for quite some time, and I want to kind of break this down a little bit to get into it. This is over on their website, Transform. Waves is transferring 1 to 2, 1 to 2.0. Where we are today in the current Waves blockchain, 2 million user wallets, which I thought was an interesting I think it's an interesting scenario to see a project that is this still fairly large in terms of market cap, over $2 billion, to have a 2 million user wallet and a vibrant community across their overall Waves exchange, also their Virez finance. And I'll show you a little bit about each one of these Waves ducks also, but 100,000 transactions in the mainnet daily. This is where it gets a little bit different from me. 100,000 transactions, even though that sounds like a lot, that isn't really a ton of transactions when you're doing multi-chain and you're crossing over into multi-aspects of blockchain, meaning things like metaverse, NFTs, all those kind of scenarios that really play into this, along with the fact that you have 2 million users and we're seeing 100,000 transactions here on the mainnet daily and this has more than 250 validators, which again, I think this is one of those projects that you would think would have 4 times that. I'm thinking in the range of around 1,000 validators that would be able to handle an ecosystem that is this grandiose around what they're trying to do. And if you look at their 2.0 outline, it says now's the time to become an ultimate platform for developers, creators, this goes into the NFT side, millions of users to reach the ambitious goals. We're building what they call a multi-nuclei structure. And some of the key points they're talking about is a new consensus with the EVM, the virtual machine for Ethereum, doing a DAO framework, which to me, when you get a DAO framework implemented in projects that maybe had not implemented that way, I'm always curious of how that transition, the governance of that project really transitions, and does it in reality fully transition? So I'm always kind of a little cautious when I see things like that, where there are an evolution of unless this was in their original framework, and I just don't know if this was in their original plan to go into a DAO framework. The other thing that they're really focusing in on is this number 3, cross-chain finance. Now this is bridging to all chains, what they call a gravity bridge and universal bridge integration. Now again, this goes back into something that Vitalik Buterin was a little concerned about with what we had seen in some of the most recent, I won't call them hacks, but breaches that we've seen over the past couple of months, especially in these bridges, the bridges that typically open up an opportunity for potentially exploits to come into a particular platform. And I think this one, in the scenario of dealing with this, the question is whether or not their security layer is advanced enough to be able to fend off those kinds of challenges from an exploit side of things. So universal bridge integration. They also have the meta component here, a bridge between digital worlds. I think this is probably the killer app with Waves, is the ability, if in fact this comes to reality, the ability to be able to meld different metaverses from both payment protocol and also NFT protocols that you could have in terms of these cross-chain exchanges that will eventually need to take place. Now remember, a lot of what's happening around this space right now is it's very binary, meaning you've got to be able to handle one platform, ones and zeros that are going directly to another platform. Usually there is not alternative use cases. This is a one-hit, application. What Waves is trying to do is really kind of cover the gambit on being able to really take all chains, all metaverse platforms. If in fact that something like that happened, essentially you would have what would be equivalent of Swift for the metaverse. Now, when you think about that, the more and more projects and partners that sign up for it, the more protocols that get integrated into it, the more flexibility it has, and the more depth in the architecture it has. And I think early stage in terms of where this is going, this still looks and feels like a big opportunity for Waves. Now, all that being said, 2.0 is still a scenario where this is transitioning. They are moving in this direction, so it's not completely in place. Their number 5 is U.S. Company and Accelerator Program. To me, I think this is good because of the fact that so many people look at crypto in general and they think of companies that are mostly in Europe, sometimes Eastern Europe, Asia. We've seen a ton of companies in Australia that have really started to develop not only in the ecosystem of metaverse, NFTs, and gaming, but I think with Waves, and though we have seen a handful of companies that are doing great here in the United States, it is very far and few between. So the fact that they are a U.S. company and they're using an accelerator program to get more development on the platform, I think that's a benefit. I think that's going to be something that over the long haul people might look at when they're investing in a token, and of course that plays into it. The question I think right now is going to be when and if this whole thing can really kind of come together. I wanted to highlight this new governance model because this is really the one thing that really sticks out to my point. Is the DAO models move forward via crowdfunding and mini assets, leaving the original concept far behind. People understand that. One of the main problems here is the lack of success evaluating mechanisms. We believe that the DAO participants whose decisions bring DAO success should receive additional benefit, have skin in the game. The typical, this is normal with DAO functionality. The Waves DAO will upgrade to the old Futarshi concept so that a new generic governance model will be launched within the applications that would far exceed the current blockchain tech. This sounds a little bit far-fetched in the sense of whether or not this could become reality. Now, I'm not to say that it could not and that the designers and the developers within this have enough of an understanding of how this might play out, because in a DAO, many scenarios really get interesting because as governance starts to shift and stakeholders change based on DAO governance, it can in some cases really change kind of the course of a project. So I don't know, it's very interesting. Their cross-chain finance bridge, they're talking about these things called gravity bridges. And this is one right here that I think is very interesting. Don't get me wrong, this is a very interesting approach. Building a bridge for users to application to access assets on any EVM compatible chain. This would be Ethereum, Avalanche, Binance Smart Chain, etc. And also Solana. The bridge is based on the threshold signatures, which makes it simple enough to avoid vulnerabilities. Now, this is where I think they should have went a lot deeper on explaining this whole aspect of using a gravity bridge to reduce the vulnerability problem that we have seen in other projects. That alone either tells me that they haven't fully vetted this out, or that maybe they have something really special and they want to keep it close to the vest. Now, let's assume that that might be the case here, but very interesting. Gravity bridges will be tightly integrated into the new Waves 2.0 network, and we'll see how this kind of goes. In parallel, they're using a universal bridge integration, which essentially, I was reading through this and trying to understand through gravity bridges and the universal, I want to call that UBI now, Waves will attract and increase liquidity of its platforms and create greater accessibility into the ecosystem. Now, this starts to play into kind of like what they're doing over here on Virez. Let me jump over to Virez. So you look at Virez, and other than Virez, the protocol, you've got Waves right there as the number 2 supply asset right here with 5.3 million and doing 3.3 0.72 on the APR, 5 point on the borrow APR. So not tremendous, but the fact that they are holding on in one of the finance communities, I think is again, the question will be to see how this transitions forward in the Waves 2 protocol. And I want to look at a couple other things here because there are some scenarios here. Let me jump to the Waves token and we'll kind of jump onto that. Let me pull that up for you guys. Let's go to the all-time. And you can kind of see there has been some past history here back all the way to 2017. So the question is going to be, is it the same team that's been around over this period of time? They've continued to develop on the platform, continued to really kind of drive in a concept of what this might be in the future. And then of course, during the run right here of last year, which is right during the run up at when Bitcoin was around, I think 60K, we saw Waves jump to its all-time high at 35.90, and then of course down and then up again back in the fall, which was pre-Bitcoin run up, and then boom right here in October, again, pre-Bitcoin run up, and then during Bitcoin's run up, you have right here, this is where Waves was at the end of November, which is most of the projects that were pumping at that time were in unison with what was happening with Bitcoin. So it moves in some different angles of how the rest of altcoins move. And it's one of the reasons that this project had never made our top 20 until this week. It had never been. We looked back at the historical on all of our top 20 altcoin projects, projections, and even the sentiment data that we had been running, and we had never been able to score this one high enough to where it cracked into the top 20. Now, granted, it's still, I think, maybe a top 100 coin token-wise. What this thing comes in at, let's see where this one rolls in at number 48. Yeah, so number 48 on Waves. So I'm still a little bit skeptical on this, and in the short term, if I look at just what's happening with this, and also, and I'll show you kind of a little bit of a scenario here. You've seen a little bit of the movement over the past month. So it had this nice run up here from the end of February 224, right there, and then boom, it had this little plateau level, and then this is really where it started, right here around the end of February, last day of February. And then it had its first jump, corrected a little bit, and then it's had its second jump. And a lot of people are pointing into the direction of where Waves might be going. So I know a lot of you are asking, is this a token to buy right now? I would say no. I'm more conservative. And I'm also, as you guys know, my strategy on any token that's super hot, if you're not in it, you have to stand onto the sideline, especially in the current economy and the current, when I say economy, crypto economy as it is right now, where Bitcoin, Ethereum, and many of the major alts are leaning in. I would still be very cautious on this project. And but at the same time, this goes back to some of the scenarios with a lot of these projects. If they are capable of truly hitting on some of those key roadmaps, if they come up with a solution that really can create a cross bridge between EVM compatibility within the Ethereum network, along with Avalanche, Solana, and many of the others. If they are the true Swift of the metaverse, the potential with security layers in place to be able to handle that kind of, one, throughput in terms of total transactions, but the ability for them to fend off the number of exploits that would have on that number of cross-chain EVM bridges that would essentially be transacting ridiculous number of overall just, congestion I could just see would be unbelievable. So the point being, if they have come up with something, then this is just a beginning for this project. So I think as they share more, and I'm really trying to find and kind of do some investigative research on understanding, are they letting any of these little nuggets out of the bag? So if any of you guys have or seen any data on Waves of them releasing some of their protocol or what they're doing from their dev team, especially in relationship to this whole bridge idea of what their theory is for Waves 2.0, hit me up on Twitter. It's at Paul Barron. Just take a screenshot, give me a tweet, anything that can kind of help me understand, is this a true solution or is this another roadmap marker that they're working toward to get to? It's kind of like fake it till you make it in the development field, I think, in a lot of those cases. but in some cases, they actually have the solution. And that's the one that I think everybody is betting on here with Waves right now at this particular time. So a lot happening to go out there for sure. And I want to go to this article right here on Cointelegraph, and they kind of talk about why its movement has been happening 100% in the last week. And they point out a couple of key things here, but one of the things that I feel like is something you should be aware of is development never stops, blockchain sector. Projects that continuously evolve are the ones that stay in the forefront and survive over the long term. And what they mean there is much like what I showed you on the overall CoinMarketCap chart, is that this team was together back in 2017, and it did have a run. And we saw that kind of flatten, and it became kind of a project that probably went somewhat dormant, at least in terms of altcoins, and maybe why we have not seen it really fly, other than its volume, its overall volume, and its market cap at 2.8 billion, I think. It's been one of those projects that's just been lingering on. But there are several like that have been around for 5 years and have been able to evolve in their process and really kind of jump to the next level. That'll be, I think, will be the tell of how Waves really kind of moves on. If they have solved this EVM compatible bridge issue that many people are facing, this is a home run. If this is we think we can, then I still have to be much more caution when I'm looking at projects like this. One more project is attempting to stay on top of the innovation they talk about in the protocol, but this is the interesting thing right here, this migration to Waves 2.0 that they're talking about, and this is what I kind of just pointed out, but stands for start, big move to Waves. It's time to reveal what's to come in 2022. Now, this again puts a big bullseye on their back to achieve these things. So maybe this is the opportunity for them to really kind of go out with what could be a really new protocol for a lot of these layer 1 chains that need the capacity to intermingle within the metaverse, and especially around NFTs could be a huge aspect to it. What their statement was right here was protocol updates. The new version of Waves will be based on practical proof of stake, consensus, and support on the EVMs, and then smooth transition is guaranteed. We're now in transition to Waves 2.0 with a multi-nuclei structure, which I'm still trying to figure that one out. All right, so you can kind of see this is really moving in to what I think will be an interesting marketplace, because there's a handful of projects that have been trying to go in this direction for quite some time. The question will be whether or not they are the ones that kind of kill it. All right, so what is kind of interesting is Aztec Gold Hero. This is a tweet that was back in the middle of February, and February 16th, and you can kind of see his whole movement is that he's got waves going right here. This is his white line. Even though if you look at some of the trends here, again, I can't make much of the fact that he has been really kind of hitting on this is interesting. But you know, here's the thing with some of these Twitter TA analysts is that in many cases they get so immersed into one single project that eventually they start hitting on those individual projects. And it's not saying that's a bad thing, it's just that I'm just saying that eventually all of these TAs are going to have one winner in this kind of scenario. So I don't know that I would always put that in. When you are following somebody that's super narrow on a particular project, those I'm always a little bit skeptical of. So just be aware as you go. And just in looking at the CPI data, and if you go back all the way back here into, and we pulled this into July of last year. This was July 2021. And this was right before they had a big run up, 73.56, and they had an amplification score that was higher, 74.51. So the anticipation was, yeah, you're going to see some big fireworks here. Same kind of scenario right here on September 30th, where it was a 72.41 and a 72.97. A little softer on amplification, but still not bad. And then the other aspect here is back here when the project is declining, 71.15 with a low amp score, so the low amp is going to continue to drive that down. And then what we see right now, right here at the base, and this is on February 23rd, AMP was 72, or excuse me, sentiment was 72.19, and the amplification score was 73.11. So again, another climb right here. So when I look at this project, it has a lot of interesting anomalies in terms of how sentiment runs. And many times what I look for is this right here. Amplification typically rarely underperforms. Now, granted, this was a more of a longer term run up. So if you look at that one, let's say that was right here from July 21st, and it went to this position right here on 181%. And at the top, that was on September 14th. So that was still really around 60 days, and it had 186% growth. Now you see that, and you see an amplification score of 74.51. This should have easily been in the 74s or 75s in this same kind of scenario, if we're still continuing to see the community growth that waves most likely can do. Now remember, this is something that is our whole basis on our CPI, is that what happens in the crypto space is very driven off of social media. There are no real, tangible applications within many of these projects that are called fundamentals when you look at traditional investment class. So it has a lot of that Metcalfe's law effect, and what I mean by that is more people start talking about it, another set of nucleus of people will start talking about it. Then another set of nucleus will start talking about it. It's that whole water cooler effect that gets into this. So that is something that should have showed up here in this particular case on waves that would have been a little bit stronger. I would have anticipated a little bit stronger amplification, or at least one that would been very similar to its previous run up, which was back here last summer, where it had that 80% run. So I still, that tells me, when I look at historical, does that mean that we could see an all-time high, which would have been right around $42, and it's trading at 22 right now? So could it? Yeah, it could, but I'm feeling that this might end up falling off shortly based on what we're seeing overall. And again, I think the other key there is if they do unveil in Waves 2.0 that they truly have cracked the code on EVM compatibility and that cross-bridge scenario, that changes the game quickly, because that right there is a big problem that the industry will have when we start to see mass adoption, and we need a lot of transaction capability. So lots happening with this project. I would definitely love to get your feedback on it, and also projects that maybe you would like to hear us talk about, research, take a little bit deeper dive into. And if you know some of the teams on Waves, I'd love to get them on the show, because I'm very curious about how they were able to do this, and really more about the tech, because to me that could be the holy grail that many of these projects have been seeking over the long term, and especially as we see more adoption. So anyway, you're listening in over on the podcast right now. Make sure and give us a shout here on YouTube. Just come right over, search Paul Barron Network, you'll find us. And of course, make sure and leave some comments, like and subscribe a video or two, and give us your feedback. Tell us what you love. Tell us what you don't like. We really like to get your feedback on understanding what is the best thing to deliver to you guys here on the channel. Of course, you want to reach me. It's out on Twitter, @Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.